So this is my speaking outline. I have 3+ pages and my works cited page. What can sailors, students, prisoners, doctors, artists, and teachers all have in common? You all might be thinking, nothing. But in actuality, when you take a step back to observe past the similarity in humanity, whether it's race, gender, occupation, or cultural demographic, you may see that they may have all shared one thing in common: the art of tattooing. In this day and age, tattoos are becoming more and more prevalent and less taboo. Derek John Roberts, in his article, Secret Ink, Tattoo's Place in Contemporary American Culture, writes that what was long considered a hallmark of American deviance, the tattoo has undergone drastic redefinition in recent decades. Statistics from the Pew Research study from 2007 state that 36% of 18 to 25-year-olds and 40% of 26 to 40-year-olds have at least one tattoo. And what was once seen as a form of gang affiliation or the marks of a social outcast, tattoos are now being acknowledged as cultural practices and forms of self-expression. With this growing prevalence of tattoos within our society, there is also a growing need for the workplace to acknowledge that this demographic or generation that we're looking at that's entering the job market bring with them an entirely new and refreshing culture. So today, my goal is to ask you to acknowledge several things. One, the changing demographic of persons entering the workforce, the need for employers to establish that equal opportunity looks past race, religion, gender, and appearance, and that above all else, the tattooing of a person's body does not define their character, and certainly does not define their work ethic. So as we begin, I want to take each element in stride and focus on the concerns that I had you all present to me prior to me writing my speech. The first concern raised was, how does this generation differ from the previous in relation to tattoo culture? Our generation, what William Strauss and Neil Howe deemed the millennials, is the rising generation of coming adolescents, teens, young adults, and adults in their 20s to early 30s. According to Scott Peter and Paul Taylor, Director of Survey Research and the President of the Pew Research Center, the millennials are the most ethnically and racially diverse cohort of youth in this nation's history. In addition, this generation is one that booms with technological advances, persistent activism in politics, and most prevalent for our focus today, partaking in what was previously considered radical physical transformations. The Center for the People in the Press released statistics in 2007 that stated that over 1/3 of the generation had decorated their bodies with some form of tattoos. In comparison to the previous generations, what we would now consider the over 40 crowd, which held only 21% of which engaging in some form of body modification. These statistics show that this generation is one that is not only one of new ideas and practices, whether it's political or religious, but one that is overall more expressive in general with any sort of body modification or changes. In an interview with NBC, Sailor Bill Johnson, the president of the National Tattoo Association, says, "This greater approval of tattoos is just part of the evolution of society as generation to generation comes to accept things that were once seen as shocking." So I've now explained a short glimpse into how the generation is different now as it was for the baby boomers and Generation X. But the second concept that I want to look at is, how does this changing demographic of tattoo acceptance affect the workplace? This generation is composed of college students, graduates, and millions of people entering the workforce. They are the potential members of society and companies that will be hired because of their new innovative visions for the future. If these individuals are part of the generation that boldly tattoos themselves, and if tattoos in the workplace are still seen as unprofessional and taboo, we have to question, how will this new generation face getting hired? William Carney and Nina Kelly from the Metropolitan State College of Denver pose the question of whether these changes in body art act as an indicator that culture is changing, and if so, does that mean that the companies and hiring managers should change their perspective to fit the culture as well? My response to this is yes. Absolutely. Culture is an ever-changing dynamic within the societies of the world. When changes occur, society has to properly work to integrate them well. Whereas tattoos were previously seen as the marks of deleterious outcasts in society, they are now seen as a form of art that has called for a lax tattoo policy for hiring across all industries. Carney and Kelly also note that, as a result of American youth changing, the workforce is understanding the need to change with it as well. Without the give and take between those hiring and those being hired, and the acknowledgement of the difference in cultural practices and values across generations, the hiring field will be out of all brilliant young, albeit tattooed, minds. So thus far I've addressed two of the presented concerns pertaining to how this generation of millennials varies from previous generations, and in turn, how the workplace is changing. But lastly, I'm going to address the need for equal opportunity to see past appearances and acknowledge that the presence of tattoos does not dictate a person's character or work ethic. My hope is to explain that just as hiring biases based on race, gender, and sexuality have been eliminated, biases against those with tattoos need to also be eliminated. In an interview with Forbes, John A. Challenger, CEO of a consulting firm, states that everyone from soccer moms to MIT computer science graduates are sporting tattoos. Preconceptions about tattooed individuals are no longer valid, and the popular Facebook page, Tattoo Acceptance in the Workplace, details hundreds of accounts of employers that welcome their tattoos for their employees, but also ones of employers who turn away employees because of their tattoos and body art and things like that. In an interview with CBS, ZB Sports manager Jim Hoisington states that tattoo policy in the workforce has to change, otherwise we're going to be out of the workforce. And Rose Keating, a career consultant, writes that, I think the companies are being forced to relook at their rules. So many people have tattoos that it's not worth to count anyone out that has a tattoo. It's no longer something considered countercultural. So in order for you all to understand that tattoos do not define a person as someone who is lazy or rebellious, I wanted to just present these pictures to you of people who are seemingly normal, but underneath of their suits or their scrubs, whatever they may be wearing, they may be covered in tattoos. And that doesn't change who they are and what their drive is to be a successful contributing member of society. So thus far I've given you glimpses of information pertaining to our generations as ever-changing and more tolerant and accepting of body modifications, beginning with the understanding that we as the millennial generation exhibit more tattoos than the generations before us, but that is not to discredit our generation in any way. So I'm hoping that this discussion has shed light onto the creative outlets that tattoos are for our generation, that we no longer see them as symbols of outcasts and failures and things like that, and we learn to push the stigmas out the door in order to bring in room for more creative, educated, and hardworking individuals that compose our blooming millennial generation.